Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast, coming to you this week from the network studios in Culver City, California. I'm your host, Dave Markel, and this is episode 191. Every once in a while, this podcast creates connections that extend far beyond a microphone and a recorded conversation. Today's episode is one of those moments. My guest is returning friend of the show, Lee Cooper. If you've been listening for a while, you'll remember Lee from earlier episodes where he courageously shared his story of childhood sexual abuse and the profound impact it had on every aspect of his life. He later returned for another episode to introduce listeners to Victorious Voices, a survivor community he had begun to help people affected by sexual trauma and find connection, understanding, and support. Since then, Victorious Voices has continued to grow, bringing survivors together from around the world and creating opportunities for healing through community, conversation, advocacy, and art. Lee is also an extraordinarily talented photographer whose work has been exhibited internationally and whose Victorious Voices portrait project is helping survivors reclaim visibility, dignity, and ownership of their stories. As part of that project, Lee recently traveled here to Southern California and invited me to participate. So I drove to California, and it's an incredible honor to finally meet him in person after all these years, spend time together, have my portrait taken for the project, and sit down face to face to record today's conversation. Before we get started, I also want to extend my sincere gratitude to the network studios in Culver City for their incredible hospitality, generosity, technical expertise, and for providing such a beautiful space for us to record this episode. Their kindness has made this conversation possible, and I couldn't be more appreciative. So, after years of conversations across continents and computer screens, Lee and I finally get to sit down in the same room together to record this episode. Lee, welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. This is a true honor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I can't tell you what an amazing thing it is just sit in person with you. What a great opportunity.
Yeah, I can't believe it as well. Like, it's pretty nuts.
How is your trip over here?
Very long.
Yeah.
Yeah, long flight, but worth it.
Well, I've already seen some of the pictures you've posted from Santa Monica Pier last night.
Yeah, I was there yesterday, caught the sunset, and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Wish I could have been with you. I think as soon as I got to my hotel, I laid down and fell right to sleep. So,
Yeah, I did the same when I got back. I think I'm adjusted now. I'm on the same wavelength.
good. You look rested. You look good.
Yeah, I am feeling pretty good about everything at the minute. Things are going really well. And it's quite I've been very reflective on this journey. I've not been to the States for a while, but I was thinking of like the first episode that I did with yourself. From that period to now is such a turnaround because I was not in a very good place when we did that episode. Still in the trenches, so to speak. Well, kind of still am, but I wasn't coping very well. I remember that episode, I wrote like a huge script. I think it was about 15 pages. I didn't read it word for word, but it was everything that I wanted to share. Yeah, it had a big impact. That essentially is what started Victorious Voices. I had the seed of the idea, but once I did your podcast, people was contacting me and feeling seen and heard with my story. I was like, okay, this could grow.
That is so amazing to me. I think it was probably one of the first online communities that I'd heard about as a start from this show.
Yeah.
And I think some previous guests had even contacted you. Am I right?
Scarlett, yeah.
Scarlett,
She
right?
said hi.
Yeah. I need to talk to her again. It's been a long time since Scarlett and I have connected. But to know that the show was making that kind of an impact and reaching out to other people in such a way that they then contacted you and you fulfilled that idea and dream of starting this community.
Yeah.
Tell the audience about how that has progressed. What's going on with Victorious Voices? How did it get its seed going once you started that from this show? How did it start to grow?
Well, I took quite a few portraits at the start. I had like the ethos of just get them done. Like they don't have to be perfect, just make them exist, which is what I did. I had an exhibition at the University of Glasgow in 2024. We spoke about that on the last episode. It was pretty good in hindsight because it got a lot of attention. But at the time, it was like, this is how survivors are treated and it's not acceptable.
I know, really. We'll talk about that because there's going to be some listeners that don't know the details of how that washed out. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then I made a connection with a guy called Rob Balfour, and he runs a charity in the UK called Survivors West Yorkshire, and he's helped the project He's like sponsored exhibitions. We put a seminar together this year that's like a 5-city tour of West Yorkshire, which is a huge space in England. And that's gone really well. We've been doing it with a lady called Dr. Stacey Maher. Her PhD was on male survivors. That's been really special this year. So the fourth one is actually next week at the Hepworth, it's called, in Wakefield, and it's a beautiful art gallery. So that has helped get the project beyond my own network, and then it's just grown from there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. It's awesome that you've met those people that are willing to participate that way.
Yeah, and it's been special for me meeting all these different people. I get a lot of healing from it, I think. It's also very challenging. It can be very heavy work. I guess you know that yourself
Yeah.
with this podcast. It can get very heavy. But then there's moments like this where it just kind of feels like this is the right path for me. It's what I'm supposed to be doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's kind of overwhelming to me as I think about it, how it all got started. Your early story, I remember talking to you even kind of off the air in our personal discussions, how you were struggling financially, relationship wise, work wise, and not knowing what the future was holding for you. And wow, look where you are.
Yeah, it was a leap of faith, it wasn't this path, but there was no path. I've had to carve the path. It's not been easy by any means, it's been challenging, but then it's starting to flow now, and there's a potential photo book in the pipeline.
Wow.
Yeah, with a big publisher in the UK. I just have to secure some funding. There's a provisional offer if I can cover the production costs. But that's been the goal for this, because that would take the topic of CSA into the cultural arena. It's not just in mental health or academia. It's in culture where it belongs, because it's a cultural issue, and get the conversation normalized. The lady who I shared this week, called Shireen, I posted an infographic yesterday on Instagram, and her quote was, people have to feel safe for these conversations. You can't just force people to tell us about CSA. Even for survivors, they're not going to share if they don't feel safe. And I mentioned that to you when we were speaking about this. I've had offers of podcasts, and I've said no, because you can see their angle is a bit of a horror story. Let's get you on and you pour your heart out to us, and we can all, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. In fact, that was kind of one of my worries from very early on in starting this, was I didn't want to become a true crime story podcast.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're talking about, is that there are so many podcasts and even newsletters, things along those lines, that exploit victims and survivors and really try and promote the podcast host or whatever, the writer. My goal here is to provide the safe platform. Like you said, you have to feel safe. And that's ingrained into what it means to be an investigator in this realm too. You're not going to get victims and survivors in a criminal investigation to talk to you about their rape or sexual assault story unless they feel safe in talking to you.
Yeah.
And so that's always been a goal, to be trauma informed enough to know how to ask questions in the right ways, and even introduce yourself to someone in such a way that just that initial contact embodies an environment of safety, in a way that people instantly understand that you're an empathic listener.
Mm-hmm.
And also understand the realm of what it means to be a victim or a survivor. I think me being a survivor myself helps in that to some degree, but also there's a deep educational process in what it means to be trauma informed and understand that. And I remember early on you talking about how Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, you took the time to read that and said that that's where you got a lot of, or a majority of your education.
Yeah, it was the first book that essentially just gave language to what I'd felt for a very long, long time. Before that, I thought that was how everyone was. Learning about dissociation, all of the terms, I was like, okay, this is me. And before, I didn't even. It's all about awareness, isn't it? If you're not aware of stuff, then you're not going to change, because you're not aware that it needs changing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a big change for me, that book. I've been reflecting on the journey from before that, when I was reading that book, when everything was changing, to now. It feels quite strange sometimes. I'm not fully out of the trenches, because my court case is still ongoing. That was supposed to take place in March. It got delisted 3 days before the trial, and has been relisted for May 2028. So after 2 years of waiting, they cancelled it and said you got to wait another 2 years. So if that happens, that'd be 7 years in total.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's up in the air at the minute. I won't go into too much detail because it's live, but that's just been a disaster.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. And the way you've written about it and talked about it, the court system over in England sounds very similar to the court system here in the US, and how victims, number one, aren't believed
Mm.
and they're discounted. They aren't in a safe space because so many investigators, prosecutors, judges, the entire system is not trauma informed, is not aware of the deep, deep impact that rape and sex assault has on people. And so they don't know how to really respond. And a lot of it's misinformation and not being educated, but a lot of it too is a lack of care.
Oh yeah, 100%. There's this particular England that this is the way it's always been done, therefore this is the way it will remain. It's quite an ignorant viewpoint. The knowledge of trauma is, even in the past 30 years, has come on massively. But like you said, it's not implemented into these systems, and seems like a willful refusal to even acknowledge the harm, because it is a harmful system. It causes harm to people, but it's just completely overlooked, and there's no accountability. That's my biggest frustration, and one of my biggest drivers to make people aware and hopefully get enough people riled up that there will be change, because it's a disgusting system, in all honesty.
Tell me your thoughts on this, because I have a theory too that a lot of this pushback is just human nature, self preservation, self protection, because rape and sexual assault is so damaging, is so disturbing, is so difficult to comprehend and to accept in our own life, even for victims and survivors. But for those who've never been through that, or who are in those positions of authority and investigative power and judicial power, they don't want to face it, partly because it is so difficult to comprehend and accept.
100%, yeah, that's true. But you have to look at it like all the other horrible aspects of life. Take cancer, for example. We don't pretend cancer doesn't exist. And if someone has cancer, we don't, ignore them. Partly because if someone has cancer, it's visible, and that's a cue. CSA is not visible, and often survivors, there is no one look fits all.
Yeah.
Some are hyper successful because they are fixated on positive aspects. Some are, drug addicts and not doing well, but there's no, this is a survivor. And for Victoria's Voices, that's one of my aims. So the portraits is, it's dignified portraiture, it's nice pictures, it's black and white, it's very human. There's nothing horrific about what you see. Some of the testimonies get a bit harrowing because people share what's happened to them, not in great detail, but we don't hide it neither. And that combination humanizes it. It's okay, this is a person that this has happened to, and they're normal.
And very similar, I think, to doing a podcast or interviewing somebody who has been through rape or sexual assault, needing that safe space. Same goes with your photography subjects. You have to build a safe space for them to feel comfortable enough to be photographed and
Mm-hmm.
to tell their story, give you their little bio that you accompany the photo with. Are you able to help us understand how you build that safety, protective environment around your photography subjects?
Oh yeah, it's actually been challenging this year on that front, because with this photo book, I did an open call which got 60 or close to 60 entrants in the end. It's whittled down now because logistics and time, and I just can't do that many. But for that reason, it's prior to that open call, it's just been people that I've met or become acquainted with. So that trust has just naturally developed. Um, Whereas some of these people is people new who I've never really spoken to before and don't have that connection. That's been a challenge to try and maintain that level of connection across so many people. That's been one of my challenges, particularly because I don't want Victoria's Voices to just be my only photography work. I'm trying to be very cautious of that. I don't want to just be railroaded into this one lane, because photography is a wide spectrum. So there's been many challenges, but I think overall I'm very open with my own story, so people connect to that, and I think people connect to what I say because they're experiencing it too. If I was just a photographer with no story of this myself, I don't think anyone would be interested, because that's just extractive. Then that's just me looking for people to take photographs of oh, that'll be interesting. So it's heavily rooted in my own experience. It's a vehicle for my own knowledge as well, because I have learned a lot about trauma. I do understand it,
Yeah,
and I can help people with this. I didn't want to just waste that.
that is so interesting and powerful to hear you talk about it that way. What's the future look like with both the project and your photography on other levels, other than just the Victorious Voices project?
It's a good question. No one knows for sure.
Yeah.
But I would like to, I think the photo book is the main goal. I want to get that, all the parts are just circling each other, like slightly out of joint. If you get them connected, that's going to hopefully change the direction of where I want the project to go. So far, it's been in conferences and in the mental health sphere. I don't want it to be in there because it's very restrictive. And I don't know what it's like over here, but in the UK, there's also very much a us and them attitude in that, in like the CSA sector between academia, services, and there's not a lot of survivor-led work that's prominent. There's a lot of people doing things like small scale, but they're not, it's not connected.
Wow. Hmm.
And that just becomes very tiresome. You know, you're fighting people that should be an ally really, but they see it different. And a lot of it is because professionals versus survivors is a bit of a conundrum, as if they have the authority over me with the experience rather than the qualification. So they've studied it, you've lived it. Who has the ultimate say on that?
That's a very interesting aspect of what you're looking at in terms of moving forward in
Yeah.
this. But you did mention something that I think is intriguing to me, and something I've kind of tried to delve into is not just educating and consulting with law enforcement and the criminal justice system, but trying to work this whole trauma informed aspect and normalizing the conversation aspect into the medical field, human resources, the civil law end of things, and mental health, and all these different entities and organizations that need this trauma informed approach. Do you also face that challenge with your photography work? And in finding victims and survivors, do you look to maybe get into other realms other than just what is drawn to you through maybe this podcast or through other aspects of you displaying your work? Are you reaching out?
Well, I do. Yeah, I do like event photography and gigs and portraiture. I will develop that more. Right now, my focus has been on getting this complete. For the photo book needs between 40 to 60 portraits. I want to complete my list that I've got, and then I will look beyond. I don't. I try and I've learned not to do this. I used to try and do everything at once, or like a million different things, and you just end up doing everything at like 30%, which means you don't get very far. So now I just focus on one or two things and give it everything. That's helped a lot.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier and something I do remember from our first episode. At the time, you were seeing a woman who came up behind you, I think, and touched you in such a way that shocked you
Hmm.
and spun you around. And she asked the question, what's wrong? You've been raped, or have you been sexually assaulted, or something to that effect. And didn't that cause some sort of awakening in you in terms of talking about it?
Yeah, so she said, was she touched on something as a kid? And I said, maybe. And then I saw like, the horror and surprise in her face. And then she says, "You being serious?" I was like, no, no, I'm just kidding. She gets mad then and she's like, you shouldn't joke about things like this. That's not funny.
Yeah.
So I'd read The Body Keeps the Score, and all of that had brought stuff rising to the surface. And then when I said that out loud, it was kind of breaking my own denial. It's the first time that I'd said it out loud or even acknowledged it like out loud. Saying it into the world is a lot different than in your head. And that's when it just built and built, and then I had to write a letter and disclose to her what happened. That started this recovery journey.
From there, I remember you talking about how that led to you finding Vanderkolk's book and reading that. You made a realization in your own life that you had been living a dissociative life.
Mm.
Everything was dissociated based on that experience. And I think that's a tremendously important aspect for victims and survivors who listen to this podcast, maybe some new listeners who may be hearing you for the first time and hearing us talk this way, understanding that they may be living their life in a dissociative state. What kind of advice, what kind of information can you pass on to them? What did you do to help yourself make some realizations about your own victimization and survivorship?
It was very confusing because it's like peeling an onion with dissociation. You learn it exists, and all your called splitting, all the negative trauma that it's too overwhelming for that child to. If I was to have acknowledged that when it was happening, that's going to destroy you. So it's your brain's natural defense mechanism. It splits it off from your consciousness. So when that comes online and the memories return, that's when it gets wild because you're feeling it, you're reliving it, you're aware of it. All that was too horrible at the time, it's not any less horrible. It's just it's there. So my advice would be strap in because it gets rough, like really rough. It's not easy. A lot of people do become addicts and will numb themselves in whatever form just to block that pain and their memories out.
Right.
But I read like Judith Herman, trauma and recovery, and just a lot of papers. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but like academic papers. If you go on Google Scholar and just type in dissociation, there'll be a ton of stuff that comes up. They're quite hard to read, some of them, but it helps you get the knowledge to understand it. And then you just have to accept what the reality is. And that's also hard because that then brings up the grief of A, it happening, B, the lives that you could have built. And it's really interesting you mentioned this because I've been to America loads of times, but pre-disclosure, it was escapism because over here I just felt like I should have felt at home because there was no triggers. I could be who I want to be. This has felt different on this trip because I've come with a purpose as opposed to escapism. When I go back, there's an exhibition next week, and I've got a lot on when I get back, so it's not escapism.
Right.
So it's felt kind of empowering and good. Like this is a work trip.
Yeah.
And that's felt good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to get into about how you said you wrote this letter to this girlfriend and explained a lot to her. But I have noticed in Victorious Voices, your online work, what an amazing writer you are.
Oh, thank you. I do love writing.
Oh my gosh, it shows. Did you have special training, education in writing, or are you just naturally gifted that way?
No, I've always been naturally inclined. I read a lot. One of my main coping mechanisms as a child was reading. I love books. I would read. If I'm eating my breakfast, I'd be reading what's on the box, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I've learned that way. And then the past few years, I've been learning how to actually structure things properly. And when I used to come to America, I wanted to be a screenwriter. That was my big dream.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it'll still happen. Who knows?
Yeah.
That was like learning story, how to structure story. So it's been a bit different with this stuff because it's factual.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always enjoyed it. And over the past few years, I've been focusing on consistency. I try and write every week. It helps me as well process. It's a good processing tool, not just journaling, but structuring what your experience is.
So there's processing involved in that and probably a lot of learning as you go.
Yeah.
But do you also find it therapeutic for your CSA and life in general?
Yeah, I love writing. I have to be careful because I if I get too into it, your days disappear because time, if you're really in the flow, time will just vanish.
Yeah.
And it's a bit weird with writing because like you could spend hours and hours and you'll just get 1,000 words of just a couple of pages. But if it's good stuff, that's well spent.
It's amazing. And I would love to see not only a photo book, but just a lot of your writing included in that, I'm guessing.
Well, in the photo book, it will be mostly the testimonies of people along with the portraits. One thing I've thought about, I don't know if it would work, is to include a picture of participants as a child as well, just to make that connection for people to see, the adult and the child. But I'm not sure on that. I need to one thing at a time.
Yeah.
But I do want to write a memoir. I've got like a rough draft that's not great, but I would like to shape it into something that's good. I like the character arc of my journey is not complete. There is an arc now, from where I was to where I am now. It's quite a big one.
I was just thinking a memoir would be great, not only because of your amazing photography work, which I think would fit well with putting something like that together, but like I said, just your amazing talent and capability of writing. It's so amazing. Tell me what you're going to accomplish while you're here in the U.S.
So I've got 2 more portraits to take. So I'm going to Santa Barbara to a lady called Tanya Abramson, and she's a lecturer at UCLA. And when the stuff at the University of Glasgow happened, Karen, who invited me up there, sent me some papers that Tanya had written about displaying CSA artwork in a public space. In the papers, it's in the hallways of a medical school. Should CSA artwork be displayed in the corridors in a public setting? And what she wrote in the paper was basically identical to what I was actually experiencing in Glasgow. So I just got in contact with her and told her what was happening, and we've kept in touch since then. Not in great correspondence, but every couple of months we'll check in. And like yourself, I've been like saying, if I can make it over there, would you have your portrait taken? And she said yes, and that's going to be a special day. And there's a lady called Colleen who I met on LinkedIn. She runs a non-profit organisation for sibling abuse here. She's let me stay at our second house, which is, a big help, and it's been amazing. So that's really special for me to take these portraits. And then on a personal side of things, I want to do some of my own photography. I went to the beach yesterday. I'm going to go out into the desert, which is a special place for me. I love the desert.
Do you?
The peace there, like the silence.
You're going to have to come visit me in Washington.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, I love the desert. I grew up in the desert of El Paso.
Yeah.
So coming out to southern Utah really full circle for me and felt great. But you brought up sibling sexual assault. Have you heard my episode with Darlene Lukowski? It was just a little over a week ago, maybe a week and a half.
No, I've not heard that one yet.
It's a great episode. She also wrote a book. I highly recommend it to you. I'm bringing it up again because I just finished the book myself. I want my listeners to get into the possibility of exploring that book for themselves. But if nothing else, listen to Darlene's episode. It's episode 183, and we're up to what? This will be episode 191. We're cooking right along.
So I have a question for you. How do you feel about that? Because it's like nearly 200 now, and that's a big number.
Yeah, it's a huge landmark for me. I get emotional when I think about where this has come, because when I started, I was scared to death.
Yeah.
That fear of the unknown. I'm sure you feel some of the same way about getting into photography and trying to find your space and wondering whether or not anybody will care or look at it.
Yeah.
I wondered the same thing. I had a lot of encouragement at the time to do this, but just a lot of imposter syndrome where I just didn't feel that it was something I could accomplish. And when I started, I think I started with somewhere around 40 or 50 listeners.
Yeah.
And now I'm pushing somewhere between 4,000 and 4,500 per month
It's incredible.
downloads.
Yeah,
It's amazing, especially for this niche. I think you mentioned that too. It's interesting that a lot of my audience, of course, are victims and survivors, both of CSA and adult rape and sex assault, but a lot of military involvement, interpersonal violence, domestic violence kind of things, and then the sibling sexual assault that we just mentioned. But really, when I think about how many people are listening to this, some of those listeners are just interested in learning more about what this movement is about. They aren't victims or survivors. Some of them are curious. Some of them are looking for, like we talked about, that true crime story kind of podcast. And when they hear that that's not really what this is about, this is about giving a safe platform for victims and survivors to feel comfortable in telling their story, but also a way to build that community. And that's what it's done. So my audience is multi-dimensional. It's made a splash in a lot of ways. I get lots of emails, lots of texts from people who really appreciate the show.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest with you, I've been so blessed and so fortunate that I haven't gotten any trolling. I don't get negative comments. And I think a lot of that has to do with my dedication to staying away from exploiting victims and survivors and staying away from trying to turn this into a true crime story kind of thing. That's not the goal.
Yeah.
And so I think that makes an impact.
Yeah. I'm the same. I've not had much grief. A couple of accounts, I guess, said things, but there's no picture or name, so I don't respect it.
Yeah.
If you don't put your name on your face to it, then
why should I care?
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that University of Glasgow experience, because a lot of my listeners won't know what we're talking about. We've mentioned it a couple of times now. Tell that story for those listeners who don't know what happened.
Yeah, so it was strange. I got invited to exhibit my portraits. It was the first exhibition of Victoria's Voices at the University of Glasgow, and it was part of the Scottish Mental Health Arts Festival, which had the theme of Invisible. And the theme was to explore what elements of mental health is invisible, what makes people feel invisible with the mental health, what are people willing to share and what are they not willing to share, where's the line, and what power structures are in place that enforce invisibility. That was the theme of the festival. And I thought, that is perfect. That is bang on the money for this debut. Just couldn't go any better in terms of a platform. University of Glasgow is very prestigious. It's a big university. Like, this is a great start. We went up there. I got to the Advanced Research Centre where the exhibition was, and the university had set it up in the entrance hall of the Advanced Research Centre. So it's in a public space. They're on plinths, so it looks like people, and it looked beautiful. I was like, this is perfect. We had the opening. There was about 60 academics there. It was great success. No issues at all on the night. So I left thinking this has been great. And then my friend went on the Monday and sent me a video saying, this is amazing, well done. But in the video, the portraits was not where I had left them. They'd been moved. So I contacted my contacts at the university, and they said, yeah, it's been moved over the weekend. There was a complaint. At the time, they didn't establish if it was a member of staff or the public. It took ages, but I had to do a freedom of information request in that it had 0 complaints from the public and 1 from a member of staff, which I think was even before it opened to the public. So off this 1 complaint from 1 person, the whole exhibition gets shifted. And it's a really interesting point because this 1 person is upset, but you don't know the positive impact that you're going to negate because you can't handle it. And then, they've pandered to 1 person and everyone else loses out. It's an interesting balance, and it was one of the reasons I contacted Tanya, because her paper touches upon this. But it caused a bit of an uproar. People was rightly disgusted because A, you invited us, B, that's where you decided to put it, and C, you're acting as society does with CSA, and that we'll acknowledge it exists, but we're not going to deal with it in any manner. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to see it. We're going to hide it away and actually pretend it's not there.
Make it invisible.
Yeah.
And what irony in that whole process. Oh, my word.
It was crazy. And then even the festival organisers, they was disappointing because in private correspondence, there was like, yeah, we've mentioned to the university, like, we're not happy. I was like, well, are you going to publicly do that? Because that's where it counts. And they said, no, we can't go that far. And they can't go that far because the university is powerful and they're a partner. So if you want to examine power structures of why this is enforced, because you're scared to challenge them, because if you do, they're probably going to cut you off, And I think for me, that was a boost for the profile of the project, because I showed I will challenge you. You could be the great big university, but if you're wrong, you're wrong. It was disgusting. And to this day, they've still not apologised. There was a petition of nearly 800 people in it. It got a lot of attention. It was in the national press twice, 3 times in the Herald. Yeah. But there's no accountability in this arena with CSA. It's very much ignored. And this is the point I was going to make actually before I forgot. You mentioned you work in organisations, and that's a great arena, but these organisations do not take this seriously because they can dismiss it. What they need is pressure, and pressure comes from people, enough visible people to say, no, this is not acceptable. It's not just 1 person that this affects. It's millions of us. So they can ignore 1 person, but they can't ignore 1,000,000 people. So it's really about making people feel safe enough to like, yeah, this is me and I will join you guys.
You mentioned before, and I know we've talked about this before too, and that is the normalizing the conversation. And I think your analogy of talking about it like we talk about cancer, you introduced that whole concept to me, and I've mentioned it before on air, that you're right. There used to be a time when nobody talked about cancer because it was so painful. And even 60, 70 years ago, when the real research of cancer started, it wasn't talked about much and it wasn't funded well. And now there's telethons and there's millions of dollars raised and people talk about curing cancer all the time. But you're absolutely right. I think we need to get millions of voices involved in this whole movement of making CSA and adult rape and sex assault a commonality in the way we as a society react to the crime, to the mental illness of preying on children. It is such a rampant, horrible aspect of human life that people prey on children. I'm so with you on this and really want to push as much as we can, getting this episode and similar episodes and similar information out to the general public so that we can build that strong, victorious voices community.
Yeah. And one thing you have to acknowledge as well is like, this is sad. People avoid it because it is a tremendously sad subject. It brings up sadness in people even thinking about it, because people feel your pain. People around us, if you're in pain with this, they will feel that. Some people will help, but some people also, if you're causing them pain, they will cut you off. That's a big issue as well. And then that's when it becomes hard for people, because trauma can, if you've not got a grip on it, you're trapped. So you can't help yourself because you're trapped. And then you need people to help you get out of that.
Yeah.
That's all part of the acceptance. You have to accept that it is sad and you will feel sad. And it's not all coming to California and good times. It's hard.
It impacts every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
It's not compartmentalized. It's not pigeonholed. It covers every aspect of your life. It's something we as survivors have to deal with on a daily basis. What can people do to get a hold of you, or to join Victorious Voices, or to help you along the way? We only have just a few minutes left, and I want to get as much information out there to my audience about yourself and your work.
The website is placesnowhere.com, and that name comes from my second solo exhibition. And the name comes from dissociation. Places Nowhere is being here but not present. That's what dissociation is for me.
Yeah.
So all the portraits are on there with the testimonies, my own work. There's the Instagram, Victorious Voices. So it's Victorious_Voices24. And that's growing now. I don't push too much on social media. It's not, again, like social media is like attention. You want people's attention. I don't want people's attention. I want them to feel it. And you can only get that at this stage in a small amount. You have to not just chase numbers, chase connections, like genuine connections.
That's right.
And this is what I was saying before, when it becomes too much and connections are not really genuine, that's when I struggle. So as the project grows, that's going to have to be a bridge that is crossed somehow. I don't know how, but we'll cross it when it comes. And then the WhatsApp community, we've scaled that down now. It's just a few of us that are good friends, I would say now. Prior to that, it was open to anyone, but it become unmanageable. There was people that needed genuine help.
Therapeutic help.
Yeah, like crisis and things like that. And it just become too much. We're not crisis workers.
Right.
And that was when the message was getting lost, because, as I said before, when you're doing everything at 30%, the photography was falling off, and the photography is what drives it all. So I had to focus on the engine. So we scaled the community back. There is a wider community connected to the project. So if you reach out to me, I can put you in touch with people. But my aim is to get this book and to get it out into the wider world. You go to these conferences and it's preaching to the choir. They already know about this stuff. You need to reach people that have no awareness and will think that is diabolical.
Yeah.
And if I was to share my story in full, which I hope once the court case is completed I can do, people will see how diabolical it is. When you consider that I am a victim of childhood sexual abuse and the crimes, if the crimes that was committed against me happened today, it wouldn't take 7 years of dilly-dallying to see how horrific it is. But because it's historical and, a long time ago, that's fine, apparently, that you can put someone in these situations. So that has to change. That's a big driving force for me.
Yeah. Well, and I want to announce to my audience, too, that you can also just reach out to me. And if you're interested in finding out more about Lee and his work, I can put you in touch. I can help you get to that. But you're right. I mean, going to the website, going to Instagram, there's easy ways to get in touch with you and to get in touch with what your work is all about. One thing I want to do right here, right now, is to thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting me know that you were coming to the U.S. and letting me know that you were going to be here in L.A. and inviting me to meet with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for everything, and thank you for coming. It's not a short drive, but we made it work.
Yeah, it's an honor to meet you, as I said earlier, but it's also a good time. There's some fun in this. Being able to meet with you. Hopefully we can do some things together. I want to go to dinner with you tonight. I want to spend that time with you getting the portrait work done. And
well, people can see your portrait on the website.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
Lee, thank you. This has been amazing. I look forward to more episodes down the road and staying in touch with you and working with you to get your work better known.
Yeah.
You're definitely going to be able to count on Sexual Assault Survivor Stories to push your work and what you're doing.
Yeah, we're getting there. It's growing.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
All right. Well, thanks.
Thank you very much.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I want to thank Lee Cooper for joining me once again, and perhaps even more importantly, for the work he continues to do to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault around the world. When Lee first appeared on this podcast, he was sharing a deeply personal story about surviving childhood sexual abuse and navigating the long, difficult road towards healing. Today, years later, that story continues, but it has grown into something much larger than one person's experience. Through Victorious Voices, Lee has helped create community where survivors can connect, support one another, and discover that they are not alone. Through his photography, he has helped people reclaim their identities and present themselves to the world not as victims defined by trauma, but as human beings whose lives contain strength, resilience, courage, and hope. On a personal note, it meant a great deal to me to finally meet Lee in person after all these years of conversations. Being invited to participate in the Victorious Voices Portrait Project is both humbling and deeply meaningful to me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. Please let others know about this episode, and please do what you can to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. A great way to do this is to start by believing. Together, we can help normalize the conversation about the realities of sexual violence, because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.